sometimes it makes it easier to let go of these things that we sometimes get tangled up and caught up in, where we think they're really important. And when we can take a step back, see it from a different angle, we can often let go of things. And that's the world that we live in these days. It operates at such a fast pace and a sense of high demand, and we've got to be really productive. We've got to have a lot of output. We get caught up in this cycle of stress that develops. We build up these expectations on ourselves and others. We put a lot of pressure on ourselves.
Hello and welcome to the Healthy Business Lab podcast, where we interview amazing allied health business owners to get their insights, learn from each other, and basically just be connected with amazing people. And today I'm super excited to have Brendan Lowe from LiveWise Wellbeing on the call today. Brendan, welcome to this episode.
Thanks for having me, Craig. An honor to be invited.
Yeah, and I just had to invite you. And again, I don't always do an introduction and read off scripts and the like, but I came across Brendan through just LinkedIn. And when I read his about, and I'll just share a little bit now, I just had to talk with him. So a little bit about Brendan: from 6.5 years traveling as a scruffy backpacker in the 90s, exploring 40 plus countries on a shoestring, over 2 decades as an occupational therapist, lifelong martial artist, parent of children and dogs, avid gardener, and SFS volunteer. I bring my whole crazy self into all that I do. That was just a brilliant introduction, and I'd love for you to elaborate on that a little bit further, Brendan. Obviously, we're very much talking allied health practice and business owners, and that's a big component of what you do. But I love how you share that you bring everything about you into what you do.
I think, Craig, that's really what brought me to occupational therapy, is that an understanding that health is more than just how our body's traveling and, or just how our mind's traveling. It's the one discipline. When I was thinking about what I was going to study, I knew I was going to be a health professional. It's the discipline that encompasses the most philosophy. And I believe in philosophy, not just as ideas, but as a science. The way that our minds work, the way that we see the world. I always say it's not just what you see, but it's how you see it. And I think OT for the allied health gives a really special perspective on that.
Love that. And again, I think it's very much been my experience from both working with a bunch of occupational therapists in both a business sense, but also in our family sense of navigating therapies and the like as well. And so I love that you've sort of touched on that, and coming from what you've sort of talked about, there's something we also love to share with our audiences, ways that people can look after themselves as a business owner and bringing in that expertise. I'd love for you to sort of start of what's some things that you very much think everybody can leverage and that you leverage from that background and that expertise around looking after yourself so that you can be the best person that you can be in your practice, but even just more widely.
I'm a little bit addicted to taking care of well-being of myself and others. I start the day, I've got my routine. I hop out of bed, I jump outside, I have a cold shower, or a cold plunge, exercise, meditate. I do all of those things. I eat well. I'm pretty good at putting stuff in my body and in my mouth that even if it doesn't taste great, if I think it's going to be good for me, I'll do it. I think that comes from my childhood Chinese background, the idea that, you have to take the bitter in life because it teaches you the lessons and it often makes you stronger. But all of the physical stuff is no good without the right perspective. Psychology focuses more on the mind, but there is this really simple level of experience as well. And what I'm really interested in life is connecting with life at its core, all the way down to a cellular level. And I think being able to reflect on where we're at a really small, minute level, from the cellular to all the atoms that we're made of, into the really, really big, where do we fit in, sit in the universe, and going backwards and forwards with that each day. We have to pay attention, pay our bills, understand that we've got to look left and right before we cross the road. But being able to see the big picture and where we fit in it in life and how life works and how it doesn't work sometimes. One of the things that has been the biggest teacher for me in life for living is actually death. And people often, when I mention that, people go, oh, this dude is dark. But actually...
Quite the contrary. That's definitely not the case.
Absolutely. So bring it on, reflect on death daily, because it actually helps shine the light. It helps us bring into perspective the things that we do, the way that we think, and the next step that we take. I would say I had the privilege to sit with both my parents as they were dying, and both in a situation where my mother had a heart attack and we didn't have much time, and I just made it there before she passed away, to the other side of the spectrum with my father suffering cancer, where we had 6 months where we knew that he was terminal. And it really helped focus me. I find that reflecting on death really brings me back to what's really important, because on a daily basis, it's so easy to get distracted, to get pulled away from some of the things that really matter in life by some of these things that have this attraction and play on many of our vulnerabilities. I think before we started the podcast, we talked about advertising, the power of marketing, the power of advertising and influence. Yeah, there's a reason why billions of dollars are thrown at it each year is because it works.
Yeah. We'll talk about your business stuff in a moment, but I love that sort of reflection, which again is something that people don't talk about a lot because of what you touched upon there of some people think it feels dark. I love the perspective that you've put on that and the framing of, if we think of death, having been in, sounds like a similar position to yourself with my mum passing from cancer and being there, and those sort of moments is an amazing reflection and perspective and timelines to kind of go, where do we need to focus our time, energy? So again, I love that you shared that, helping to shine the light, even if you're talking about something that historically people kind of have negative or dark connotations with. And so it's interesting to flip that script a little bit to get the benefits that you'll get from sharpening that focus.
Yeah, and I think very much a modern Western way of, it's often very sanitized and separated. We talk about me being a scruffy backpacker. In the 40 plus countries that I've traveled in, over half of those have been developing nations. And in a lot of places, what I really loved is that life is laid out in front of you every day. And it's a little bit messy sometimes, and that's how life is. In many places, they don't try to hide that, and they actually embrace it, especially in lots of parts of Southeast Asia, Africa. You see life and death every day. And when I traveled, I was 18 when I first put a backpack on and took off. I wanted to see not the world for these iconic sites, but I wanted to see how life operated. I wanted to see the different ways that people lived and understand the similarities and the differences across the globe. And I really think that especially places where people are closer, they're more connected with the process of death, is that I really saw people embracing life. The understanding that where everything is impermanent, you keep coming back to that impermanence. Sometimes it makes it easier to let go of these things that we sometimes get tangled up and caught up in, where we think they're really important. And when we can take a step back, see it from a different angle, we can often let go of things. And that's the world that we live in these days. It operates at such a fast pace and a sense of high demand, and we've got to be really productive. We've got to have a lot of output. We get caught up in this cycle of stress that develops. We build up these expectations on ourselves and others. We put a lot of pressure on ourselves. And I've done work.
We've all done that.
Jobs. And actually, the reason why I started LiveWise Wellbeing services is because I was in a very hectic job. And it was a 9 to 5. I was working with the most traumatized youth you can imagine. And the trauma part, I was okay with that. I've done a lot of that over the years in various roles and positions, but the pace, my 9 to 5 that then started at 8 and ended at 6 and then was going to 7 and then was going to 8 and still not feeling like I was able to keep up.
And I think that's an experience, like there's so many of our allied health practice owners and business owners out there that have that similar feeling of the pace. There's always more. There's more people here. There's more people to help, given the world we're in, and the pace is something that I think is very front of mind. So I'd love for you to sort of speak to kind of that business side and take into where you're going in business and some of the things that you've done. I love that idea of the acknowledgement of impermanence and been able to then take that into that how we operate on the day-to-day basis. And it's interesting that if I then go back to one of the things you said a little bit earlier of just taking stock and being able to sort of within our cell, going down to the cellular level, as you were sort of talking about that, I know I just sort of immediately sort of calmed. And that pace idea that you've touched upon, I was just like, yeah, there's no need for that. This is essential and being. So I'd love for you to talk about in business and the like. We always talk about experiments here, but how have you experimented in the idea of impermanence in business and where you're going and how you want to bring in that idea to what you do?
This is not my first rodeo. LiveWise Wellbeing is my second enterprise. Just touch on the first one because I'm really curious and interested in perspective and the way we see things. I think 3 o'clock in the morning, quite a few years ago, I woke up with this brain fart. I had this idea that how do we share that? How do you have those mental prompts that remind you about important things to help keep us on track every day? And this 3 o'clock in the morning idea was, well, where is a billboard? Where is something that we see in front of us every day, most days, that where we could put a message to remind us to stay on track? And I'm not sure how I got there, but I came up with this idea that undies, we change our underwear most days. Some go commando, but those who wear undies generally put them on and then take them off. And so I created this business called Smartass Undies, and underwear made out of recycled and organic materials that had motivational messages on the backside, a little quirky with a touch of humor, but bringing age-old wisdom matched with a modern vernacular. And I went pretty hard at that for quite a while to try and push that and get that going and get traction, do the marketing, all of the social media. And then I realized while I was doing this, I was also working a day job, that I was burning myself out. I was actually not doing. I was stepping further and further away by trying to progress and make this something really viable. In a very short story, what I discovered, I came across this barrier of the algorithms. We talked about how magnificent technology. I discovered a less than beneficial side for myself, because who knew that the word, I thought I did my due diligence with the name and the word ASS to make sure it wasn't going to unsettle the algorithms, and it all passed. The name was approved by Facebook and Google. But what I didn't realize is the algorithms are a little bit more quirky than that, even more quirky than me. And that when you match images of bottoms, which is how you advertise underwear, with the word ass, the algorithms decide that that's sexually explicit content and kiboshed all my marketing. And I tried to fight that. I paid people to try and negotiate and work through with trying to get in contact with somebody, a human from Facebook and Google. Then I just came to the realization that this has had a life and now it's time to go.
Yeah. But again, that's so many major learnings, and just even that process, I guess, is what I'm super curious of, that going back to the where the idea came from and what you're trying to do, which kind of leads back to that idea of how do we put something in front of people's minds? How do we make it in a different way? How are you going to get attention? How are we going to draw that attention and then have the impact that we want to have? A very interesting arc that you've gone through in that whole process.
I think there's part of it is a life stage. There is a time in your life to hustle, but what I worked out is that time for me is not now anymore.
And that's a brilliant realization as well in itself, isn't it?
Yeah. I was actually in Hong Kong at a party on top of this building with all of these $1 million sellers, and the conversations that were going on around hustling and how to sort of get to an audience and get your product out there. It just wasn't me. I was there in that moment and I realized it's like, I enjoy talking to entrepreneurs, people who are creative and looking to do things in a different way. But what I realized is that I'm not the person who really wants to push something on people. I really realized that social media is not for me. It is that for myself, not only you do the marketing, you go on there and you're posting stuff, but it's too powerful for me to handle, because I felt you would pull me in, and then all of a sudden I'm looking at all these different stuff and what people are doing in their life, and then thinking I'm not doing that, I should be doing that. And so with LiveWise Wellbeing, I was really clear that I was going to have a completely different model to that. Is that The Brendan today, the 50-plus-year-old, doesn't want to work at that pace. And very fortunate, I feel very privileged at this time as an occupational therapist where I do no chasing of work. That I have as many clients as I want to take them on when I feel comfortable to do that. It's not the case with every business for sure, but that has been something that the NDIS has enabled. The wellbeing coaching is same different. There are certainly lots of elements with when I do the wellbeing coaching with people that I bring that comes from my occupational work. But what I'd say with being coaching, it allows me to bring in so many more elements from life that are on the peripheries, but still part of the traditional OT role. The question you asked me earlier about, some of the things about staying well, I did mention perspective, but something that we first talked about when we first touched base, I was just about to head into silence for a week, which is something I aim to do every year, is to do a silent meditation retreat for 7 days. I love it, but it's only a snippet out of my life. And I have a daily practice of meditation. I make sure I sit. Sometimes it's only 5 minutes. Sometimes it's an hour. But what I really promote is these micro moments. And talking about technology, I now use technology to help me with that. That one device virtually everybody has is my tool throughout the day to remind me to take a moment, to breathe and to just be. And every time I go to pick up my phone, before I actually pick it up, I take 3 mindful breaths.
I love that one. And we were talking about that, and I had that note down from our very first conversation, and you mentioned that one. It's one that's stuck with me, of that notion of always being aware of, conscious and meditating, and the simplicity of tag it to something that you know is going to happen. And it's the old habit building kind of idea, but mindset is just like, it's just a little reminder. Okay, let's take those deep breaths, then I'm going to be calm. And I always so much smoother when I jump on the call or do it. I mainly do it. I don't do the phone calls, but it's the interview, the Zoom call or whatever it is. But just as you're about to click into the room, then it's exactly that, taking 3 breaths. It makes a world of difference.
Absolutely. When I mentioned the social media, I really felt that pull. There's that draw that you go, got to check my phone. And sometimes we go, I don't even know what I'm checking it for. I don't even know why I'm about to open it up. And then sometimes you'll look at the screen and it's like, well, I don't even sure which app I'm going to look at right now. I just felt this drive to pick it up. And those 3 mindful breaths give me the chance as a circuit breaker for that to go, do I actually need to?
Actually put it back down. Yeah, 100%.
Or if I do get a message, it puts me in a position where when I do open it up and I've heard that notification, that I have a little bit more clarity when I look at it.
I love that. And that clarity is super interesting. I'll circle back to the business sort of things, to what you were talking about before, moving into doing your OT work and the coaching work and doing it at your pace, coming out of the word pace, and just sounds like you've just been very intentional with it and know that if I do this from here, as you point to my heart for those listening rather than watching, but as you sort of come from that place, then everything just sort of flows from there. And it just sounds like by tuning in to yourself and doing it in your way and being able to incorporate that multitude, a multifaceted you, then everything seems to be working for you. And no doubt the outcomes that you're getting for the people that you're working with are probably exponential as a result of that. Is that a fair comment?
Absolutely. And you can be true to yourself and you go, I can do things and bring the best parts of me to it, and I can share that with others. Then it becomes less effort. Now, work is work. You've got to put effort in. There are times where you have to be disciplined, but when you're doing something that you truly believe in, it certainly makes it a hell of a lot easier.
Yeah. And if we're touching upon that, you're finding it easier, therefore you can give more and the like. I'd love for you to sort of share. We always love to share some of the work that our guests are doing and the transformation and the impact that they have. Love for you to give an example of something that sticks out in your mind of the transformations that you see in place by being able to relay sort of some of those, your own experiences and expertise with the people that you work with.
Yeah, I've thought about that. There's somebody, I'll call them Jack, that I've been engaged with, that when I first met them, they had a daily soft drug habit and they weren't doing any exercise. They were about to become parent. They were somebody who was really driven. Actually, when I met them, they were a very passionate vegan, but also a very passionate pot smoker. And we just started talking about life, what's important and what are the things that you digging down to what you really want out of life. And this person had a lot of difficulties in their family with their, particularly father. They wanted to be a very different parent. They wanted their children to have a very different experience in life. We moved to, for you to be, you want to be a different dad. What needs to happen for that to happen? The coaching part is part giving suggestions and ideas, but the other part of people churning through and working through things themselves, just providing that right little nudge here and there to guide them in their thought process. And it's like, oh, well, maybe I should take care of myself better. And I certainly didn't want his children to lead a life of daily pot smoking. We talked about a lot of things. We did a few things. The person actually was able to come and do a physical workout with me. And a lot of people I connect with, it's like this over a video call. However, this person lives in the area. And we did a little exercise, some training, and I said, burpees. A lot of people hate burpees. I say, I have moments where I do too. But it's a really pretty simple exercise with several different movements in it that you can do quickly and you can do it anywhere. You don't need a lot of equipment. Moving on, this person now scares me. They've gone from...
In a positive way, on that.
In a positive one, smoking pot every day to now they will get out. And I think at one stage he'd done like 500 burpees in a session.
Wow.
His kids are older now and they're involved in exercising with him. But it's not just the exercise, it's the way that he talks about life with them now. And another part of me and coaching and supporting people in is around longevity and lifespan, but very much around health span. And if you want to be, I say, for me, my goal is my kids are, one of them's an adult now and one of them is soon to get their driver's license. That scares me a little too. But I want to be around for the next stage to be a grandparent. So we talk about what do you need to do to get there? And then that idea that exercise is, you hear it everywhere. Everybody knows it. It is almost the panacea for so many health conditions, mind and body, but it can be hard to get ourselves to do something. And the other little thing I encourage people to do as a little strategy when you're starting out something to change and improve your health is to start really have something to anchor to that's really small. Instead of setting massive goals, or you might have your long-term goals, but really start with a micro goal. And I have this thing where I say, start with one. If it's about developing a meditation practice, start with one breath. Say, I'm going to sit, or I start with 1 minute. I'm going to sit, or I'm going to stay still and just try to be really present for 1 minute. Or I'm going to do one burpee. And to set up a good habit is actually just to start. And actually to form the habit first, even if it's like, okay, I'm going to get up each day and exercise and I'm going to set the goal that I'll do one burpee. I'll do 1 minute on the exercise bike. And you go, and most people start and they go, oh, well, that was pretty easy. Yeah, I'll do 2 minutes. I'll do 3 minutes. I'll do 4 minutes. And most people don't do the 1 minute, just the 1 minute. But if you do, you get that positive reward. The brain dumps a little serotonin, some dopamine going, hey, I did what I said I was going to do. And if you do more, awesome.
Brilliant. And that's so good. And I've got so many little gold nuggets for that last little section, as well as the whole chat. Actually, micro moments were sticking in my mind around that was the idea that 1 is harder than 1 to 100. And if you do that 1, then it's just that domino effect at the end of the day. The snowball builds and builds and builds. But going back to your notion there of longevity and health span rather than lifespan, I just love that simple little different tweak and the perspective, which again, what I love that you've shared on the chat today is just those tweaks to perspectives that has definitely got me ticking over. Here we talk about on the business side of things, sustainability. And it's in that same idea of, okay, we've got business sustainability, but what's the health span for ourselves as an individual, but what's the health span of our business? Is it healthy? Is it sustainable? And what we're all about here is seeing the transformations that is similar to what you've been able to share. And that's what we want. All our allied health business owners out there wanting to be able to create these lovely, healthy, sustainable lives and practices so we can keep on serving our clients.
I have a business model that I don't have this idea that I'm going to stop and retire. I have this idea that, especially with the wellbeing coaching, is that I hope that I'm only going to get better at it. As I learn more and I experience more of that aging process, then I hope to be able to share more with people. Is that an insight is not something that comes accidentally. It just doesn't come just because you age. But when you're in this world longer, it gives you more opportunity.
There's more opportunities to see those.
Yes, to work on becoming wiser and seeing things in different ways and learning more than you can share.
Well, on that note, thank you so much for your time and sharing what you have shared so far. And as this podcast evolves and grows, and again, this is a part of an experiment to do at least 100 episodes, hear the conversation and the impact we're having. I hope that we're able to go beyond that 100. And I'm sure as I could continue talking with you for hours, Brendan, it's been so many great little nuggets and things that I'm picking up that I'm going to be implementing or tweaking my perspectives on a little bit. I really appreciate what you've shared here today. That's awesome.
I think what you're doing is great. Connecting with health professionals, bringing them in, sharing ideas. That's how we all grow.
I love that. I appreciate that. And if people do want to connect with you, where's the best place for people to reach out and connect with you so that we can drop it into the show notes and make sure that we expand our networks?
Certainly LinkedIn. It's still a social media platform, but it is one that I do go on occasionally and certainly not daily. But email is probably the most direct way, definitely. So I'm happy to share my email address if people are curious about what I do. I'm always happy to have a chat and a little exploration of who I am, and if what I do suits other people. I like to understand and learn about people.
So good. We'll be doing that. We'll drop the email address and LinkedIn profile into the show notes so that all the other allied health practice owners and anybody else who comes across these conversations, I'd highly recommend having a chat with Brendan. That's a wrap here from the Healthy Business Lab podcast for today. Make sure you like, subscribe to keep on hearing more great insights and learnings from people in this space. Thanks again, Brendan.
Many thanks, Craig. Have a great one.
Thank you for listening to the Healthy Business Lab podcast. Make sure you subscribe to keep up to date with all the latest episodes.